Hello everyone, friends. You are on the Pro Blockchain channel. We continue our series of very cool podcasts, inviting guests. The goal of our podcast is to understand what the cryptocurrency market is all about, what things to pay attention to, what works today, what doesn't, how to preserve your capital and not lose it. In general, that's why you definitely need to watch our podcasts, like them, share them with your friends, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Today we have a very cool speaker, a cool guest. Many of you know him. Vladislav Martynov is our guest today. He is involved in many interesting things. Managing partner of the international investment fund BR Capital, conducts masterclasses, presentations, corporate training, and is finishing work on a book. Today we will talk about what the book is about when it will appear on the shelves. He participates as an advisor, co-founder of several Web3 projects, helps scale businesses, and much more. Let's get acquainted right away. Vlad, hello. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast. It's very, very valuable. Slava, good morning to you too. Hello, everyone.
Yes, hello, guys. Hello to all the viewers too.
Awesome. Let's start right away in our tradition. Tell us a few words about yourself. Background. Expand a little on what I said. And how did you get into crypto?
Well, this is going to take a long time. So if I were to tell it in detail, because I am currently 56 years old, of which I have spent 30 years actively engaged in entrepreneurship in the field of high technology, it's usually always such early stage disruptive breakthrough technologies. So I start, and in general, that's how my life has turned out. Therefore, I won't talk about everything, but I'll actually tell you how I got into crypto. By the way, this is related to all my entrepreneurial experience because I started my first startup, a high-tech startup, back in 1998. In about 3 years, it will be 30 years since I've been involved in entrepreneurship. It's scary to think about, and this project was in collaboration with Dmitry Buterin and Maya Buterin. So accordingly, we launched a very cool project while bringing a next generation RP system to Russia. We actively localized and implemented it there. And then eventually we sold this business to Microsoft. So we moved to North America. And in general, we did many further projects together. We became very close friends and launched several high-tech projects in North America as well. And at some point, our children grew up. Vitalik, I believe, turned about 16. And that's Dima Buterin's son. And by the way, Dima Buterin was the first to tell me about Bitcoin right at the very early stage, that such a digital currency was emerging. To be honest, the first time, well, I didn't fully understand what it was, how it worked. It all seemed very much like some hackers were doing something. But then later on, he said, listen, my son is also now launching, he wants to launch, Ethereum. Well, back then, it didn't even have a name yet. Just to launch some kind of decentralized platform. Because, well, Bitcoin is quite limited in its use cases, and there isn't a universal platform on which decentralized solutions for various tasks can be developed. And so Vitalik wants to try to create something like that. And I just came there, though I don't remember the exact details of how that meeting took place. We had a long conversation where I was trying to understand what exactly all this was needed for, right? And at some point, I realized that this is an amazing technology that will significantly change the world and most likely change it for the better. Because, Lou, everyone watching probably understands the whole context. A world without intermediaries, a world where people have more opportunities to influence their financial freedom, to influence essentially the rules of living in a particular community. There are many such features that are very deep philosophically, fundamentally met, and they really captivated me. So accordingly, I started to delve into it. At some point, an advisory board was formed within the Ethereum Foundation, and there were several tasks for this board. I also joined this board, helping with various tasks. And through this, I immersed myself and developed in this whole topic. Because as someone who is not very technical, I don't have a strong technical or programming background. This immersion into such an atmosphere of people who are firstly ideologically very motivated, such passionate individuals, right? To create a certain technology for the benefit of people, while also being extremely talented, essentially genius, mathematicians and programmers. This was very interesting to me. I was immersed in this for a long time. And in general, I came to understand quite well the essence of what is being created, right? And in fact, I began actively helping the Ethereum Foundation, telling the story of what they are creating, helping to explain it all. Because at first I perceived it as some kind of nonsense, a scam, fraudsters, and so on. And finally, people gradually started to understand that there is actually much more behind it, such a powerful story. So somewhere along the way, I got involved and then moved on to various investment stories, different projects as an advisor, as an investor. And how long have I been doing this now? Probably almost 10 years.
Cool. Very interesting story. And it's great that, well, many don't know, I, Vladislav, know you. We came to some of your joint educational streams. But many don't realize that you were directly at the origins of Ethereum. That is, you actually saw how it was all being built. And it will be very interesting to ask you some questions. We will now return to your business background and ask some questions. But right now, I would like to get your assessment of the recent event that happened on the Bybit exchange. It was one of the largest exchange hacks. Almost $1.5 billion worth of Ethereum was withdrawn. Overall, give some assessment of this situation. How might this affect the market? What are the dangers, or how should people act so they can analyze this information and behave correctly in the cryptocurrency market?
Yes, look, I'll try to be brief, and if anything, feel free to ask clarifying questions. Firstly, of course, our market is always susceptible to information news, right? And the information field. If some negative news occurs, the market adjusts quite quickly, yes, downwards. If something positive happens, it quickly adjusts upwards. So this susceptibility to news influence is very strong in the market today, much stronger than in other markets. So moving on. The second very important point is that from my point of view, well, let's define Bybit. Bybit is a centralized financial organization, right? And it is managed by people. So in general, the responsibility for the withdrawal, for the hacking of a centralized financial organization, yet in my opinion, lies with the centralized financial organization, that is Bybit. So accordingly, this is bad for the market in the short term. And we see a correction, right? Although I don't think the current correction today or yesterday is solely related to the hack. I think a combination of some other factors also played a role. We can talk about them too. So, but I think that in the short term, even in the very short term, this news will quickly fade away, and the market will quickly recover from it. Because, well, even if you look at a similar story with FTX, it only affected the market for about a month, and then it stopped having an impact. So although FTX was, of course, a more significant story, well, how was it more significant? More significant in that there was deliberate fraud by the FTX executives. Again, I emphasize that centralized financial organizations should always be distinguished, right? Because if, for example, the Bitcoin protocol were hacked, it would be a complete collapse, right? Or if, say, the Ethereum protocol or network were hacked, it would also be a fundamental blow to the market. And the fact that a centralized organization, due to some parameters of irresponsibility, I don't know, negligence, for example, some criminal negligence, lack of qualification, or something else, because they didn't think through the security measures sufficiently right, that their money was taken out. That's their responsibility. Unfortunately, it's sad, but this is how they could hack a bank, for example, right? Or some centralized exchange. Even some classic fiat bank was hacked and the money was taken. Well, so what? So the fraudsters did such an act. who's to blame. The bank security service is to blame. The same applies here. Therefore, I think this news will stop affecting the market, and I think it didn't have a strong impact. That's it. It did have an impact, of course, but not a strong one.
Damn, the microphone was off. All right. Thank you for the comment. Let's move on to the next questions. I wanted to learn a bit about your background in terms of the projects you've been involved in. What projects have you participated in before? What are you working on now? And what is your focus?
Look, I had a phase before the crypto industry, before blockchain technologies. And of course, I had several very successful, quite prominent international projects during that time. One of them is actually the first project that Dima, Maya, and I launched, which I mentioned earlier. It's the company Columbus IT. And the system was called Accepta back then. It's a next generation system, an ERP, MRP system of the new generation. That's it. Then I had a project also with Dima and Maya called 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗘𝗥. We tried, as soon as cloud technologies appeared, right at the very early stage, to create a CRM system, a management system for non-profit organizations. That's it. On what? Kind of on the SaaS model. It was one of the very first SaaS automation systems in North America for such a segment, right? Non-profit organizations. It was also quite a successful and remarkable project. That's it. Then I had a period, I think, of 7 years, a little more. I was involved with a rather innovative smartphone. We made a phone with 2 screens, a Russian one, the first Russian phone we made. We did it quite innovatively. We wanted not just to make it Russian, but to create a phone that would change the perception of smartphones, right? It would create new, very convenient usage scenarios for the phone. So we made the second screen, an electronic ink-based screen on the back of the phone, and developed various applications for its use. It was really cool. And in general, the entire global international industry really loved our phone, because various media experts were always very excited and responded positively to this innovation, right, with the second screen. So after we sold this project, we sold it to a Chinese company. We were forced to sell it, by the way, because there was geopolitical tension following the situation with Ukraine and Donbass, you see. And most Western mobile network operators who were involved in selling our phone, as well as investors who planned to invest in our project, of course, suspended cooperation with us. So, and we had to switch to China. So, and when we started working in China, we realized that a Chinese partner was absolutely necessary there. Well, and the Chinese partner eventually completely bought out this project from us, right? It was also very interesting, kind of, by the way, I'm writing a book about this. So this year, yes, probably. In the second half of this year, it will be released. There, you know, I have almost 37 chapters. These are untold stories about this project. Because, of course, what was happening under the hood, this iceberg, yes, it's certainly a large number of dramatic, comedic, and mystical stories. And I think for now, why I started writing the book, because I think they will be very useful for young entrepreneurs, especially those building international businesses, right? Just to find out what can happen. It's not some kind of textbook. It's more like an interesting, adventurous novel, but with life hacks, right? That's it. So that was the project. This is everything that happened before my interest in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. Yes, there was another project in artificial intelligence. My son and I developed an analytic system based on computer vision and artificial intelligence for hockey fish, for hockey clubs. That's it. In principle, it was quite successful. Our system was used by most of the hockey teams in North America. And it was also used a bit in Russia. Well, sort of, right? But we had to sell it. We also had an exit from this deal. And we had to sell it at a significant discount because the special military operation had just begun. And in North America, people realized that if a business has Russian roots, it's better to either quickly buy it at a discount or not touch it at all. And since our main sales were in North America, We had to sell it there. And so, yes, we sold it. But it was still very interesting because at an early stage, we were among the first, probably the very first, to create a similar story for sports, for hockey, who were involved with artificial intelligence. We started it about 7 years ago, and about 2.5 to 3 years ago, we sold it. That's right. 3 years ago, yes, it's already been 3 years. And we actually started more than that 8 years ago. Those were the kinds of projects we had. Then in my career, a very interesting and vibrant phase began related to blockchain. I just talked about the beginning of it, right? I was an advisor for 𝗗𝗦𝗦𝗘𝗥, and then in 2017 and 2018. By the way, during that time, we visited Russia a couple of times with Vitalik, and we interacted a lot with developers in Russia, with banks. In general, we had a lot of activity in Russia. We even established the Ethereum Competence Center in Russia, which assisted developers, but provided consulting and worked with large corporations. So then the ICO era began, and it was an interesting experience for me because, despite the fact that projects often looked good, they still either turned out to be scams or just fell apart, right? So, and of course, I got burned a lot back then because the product ideas were interesting, but either the technology wasn't ready or the people involved weren't very reliable, right? In the end, I joined 2 or 3 projects as an advisor, but they were quite unsuccessful, right? I would say. Nothing to brag about. But in the end, when there was just an overwhelming number of requests, I was being invited as an investor, an advisor, and with colleagues and partners, we decided to establish a fund that would, filter all this effectively, and thus in 2018, actually in 2017, but I think it was officially established in 2018, the BR Capital Fund finally emerged, which began to invest more systematically in this market. And in general, we have a lot of successful early stage investments that we made, including the company 1inch, a decentralized exchange, and Consensus, yes, and many other well-known projects today. We were very actively investing in DeFi at an early stage, and this gave a huge sort of boost to the development of this fund. Among the projects where I also worked as an advisor, I can probably mention some successful and, as it seems to me, very remarkable ones. There's a project called Azura. This is predictive analytics, right? It all started with automation in decentralized infrastructure, specifically in the sports betting market. Yes. And then it evolved into a predictive analytics platform, right? Forecast predictions. Yes, forecasts, analytics for forecast. So and it's interesting here that the project is developing very actively. Well, the story was initially quite interesting too. Basically, to remove the middleman, like the betting companies, because there were a lot of problems there. Firstly, there is no transparency. And secondly, the payments are strange. And in general, the middleman takes a commission, whereas a smart contract protocol can, in principle, accept bets automatically and then distribute them based on the outcome of the game or some result. And here arises the question, why have a middleman? This is, of course, a direct case where a decentralized protocol based on smart contracts should be implemented, where efficiency clearly emerges. And a big topic arises, right? A large online service that will become popular. That was the Azura project. But today I am fully focused on, as you said, managing the fund. I am a managing partner, not just a partner, but I handle the daily management of the fund. I conduct masterclasses, provide training, talk, and speak at conferences, not only on investments in cryptocurrencies, not only on the crypto market in general or blockchain technology, but overall. Yes, by the way, I have various interesting formats. I think I've developed a pretty good methodology. Over 3 years, I have a format where people can start from scratch, complete beginners come in, and after a 5-hour masterclass, they leave able to essentially form their own portfolio and understand the main processes that occur. Well, of course, they are mostly hodlers. So they kind of form a profile or work with DeFi, with farming, right? But of course, they don't trade. Well, you can provide the basics, but mostly these are the kinds of stories I have in my master classes. We can do a deep dive. Sometimes we choose a market segment and delve into it. Well, besides crypto, I also, of course, do a lot. Well, not a lot, but from time to time, I engage in mentorship for entrepreneurs. I provide some consultations to young entrepreneurs. After all, I have accumulated a lot of experience. As I mentioned, in 3 years, it will be 30 years. It's hard to believe. So I also do things like that. So that's how it is.
I have a clarifying question. It would be interesting to use the example of the fund. That is, we sometimes think about how when you reach a certain level and you already have, well, some vision of the market, especially if, like us, there's also media impact. So we have been doing this for the 6th or 7th year or whatever year it is. I've lost track. So there are many acquaintances, many who are subscribed, some closed groups, channels. So how does the idea of a fund initially form, right? Like creating a fund, and then how is it structured? Can you explain in more detail how you established your fund and accordingly how you choose projects, teams or non-teams? I think this is a super interesting story. For example, how much money is needed, right? Is $1 million enough to create a fund, or can it be done without any money at all? Let's spend, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes on this story. So
sure.
And before
I can only share our experience, but there are just some nuances based on, look, the story was simple. Somewhere around 2017 or 2018, in the middle of 2017, the flow of requests for me to be an investor and advisor skyrocketed. There were about 100 requests, and I couldn't process them in a day or properly analyze a single project. My brain just started to melt. I realized that I needed a structure, I needed analysts, I needed a process, right? Then I started telling my friends, former business partners, and just sending out this information. I want to create a fund. I want to create a fund. I was just telling everyone on similar broadcasts, just friends. And literally within 2 or 3 weeks, reality turned towards me and said, look, here's someone. One person appeared, Reza. Another person appeared, Shota, then Sharif, then Lau, my former colleagues and friends. And they said, oh, let's do it. Sure. Here's what we can do. Here's how we see it. We got together and discussed. Okay, so what kind of fund are we creating and what is it about? How much money is needed and so on. I had one request. They had a slightly different request. We somehow aligned it, synchronized. And I said, like, I'm very interested in building a global fund, a fund that will become tier 1, right? Maybe not immediately, but we will get there immediately. But so I understand that there are several stages. Let's determine what the first stage is. We looked at the market, obviously based on our expertise. We realized that we are not brilliant programmer mathematicians, although we had 2 very strong people on the team. By the way, it's not immediately, but they joined later. Now, I'll tell you what this led to. And we said probably the main topic right now is DeFi. It is just beginning to emerge. The main use case for decentralized infrastructure in crypto is probably still decentralized finance. They are at a very early stage, so let's invest small amounts in everything that looks more or less decent. We understand that 90% will be failed projects, so our investment is small, but we have a wide range of companies, right? Decentralized exchanges, decentralized lending protocols, everything that falls into this segment, we analyze a little, but we don't stress too much because we understand that only with this strategy can we find a gem and discover a unicorn, right? When you invest small amounts in a large number of companies. And that's how we operated for several years. Oh, how long? Well, about 5 years, probably. Well, 4 to 5 years, right? And during those 5 years, it suddenly turned out that we were among the early investors. We were among the early investors. We were among the early investors. We were among the early investors because we invested there and up and the return. Yes, a lot fell off, but the capitalization of these companies grew, well, by hundreds of times, right? Well, or, by tens of times. So that kind of led us, okay, the stage has passed. What's next? Yes, and by the way, it's very important. Initially, we looked at what was on the market. And in the market, basically, there are only, 5 to 10 funds that are truly regulated, international Everything else is a very dangerous, risky business. What does regulated mean? It means that you register the fund according to all the rules, like a classic investment fund, in the right jurisdiction, in a clean white one. You sort of obtain licenses, permits, and you have it as regulated, which is very important because many investors, even when they invest in investment funds, don't understand that most funds are either just some Telegram channels calling themselves funds or just some LLCs, right? But it is very high risk for any retail investor. Regulated means that there are at least two legal entities, and there's also an auditor and there's an administrator. And here's a very important thing. There's a fund where investors put their money. That's one legal entity. And there's a company, the second legal entity that manages this money, right? And there, my partners and I have a share. But how? That is, we manage this money, but we cannot withdraw this money for ourselves outside. All transactions for investor payouts, their dividends, right? Or the return of money to investors is done only by the administrator of a certified licensed company, completely independent, right? And the audit is conducted monthly by a separate independent auditor. And this, as it were, is a very reliable story, right? And many do not understand this. Accordingly, this is the second element. And the third element is that 5 years have passed. And we started again as well. We had several strategies. There was one venture strategy, one strategy for investing in DeFi. And these, as it were, brilliant mathematicians I mentioned who appeared also developed a unique platform for what is called delta neutral trading. That is a neutral trading strategy using certain artificial intelligence algorithms with a hybrid model where not people work with AI-based tools, and they accordingly use this market inefficiency like statistical arbitrage and essentially earn every day engaging in trading, earning a certain percentage. And this is yet another strategy, right? Just this kind of market trading. So we have these three strategies. We have refined them. And in general, in 2021, we created the next, second version of our fund based on this experience. And overall, our strategies have also changed. We have Venture Way, where we invest in company equity. This is a long-term investment. You wait there for several years while the company grows, help this company to grow, and then exit either through tokens or equity. This is, by the way, also a nuance of this fund because we are called the Web 3.0 fund, but it kind of means either investments in projects that are based on blockchain technology or projects that still have a centralized service but serve the crypto industry, right? And if it's a centralized service that serves the crypto industry, then it's most likely an entry into equity, meaning the company's capital. And the exit is different through the sale to strategists or an IPO. But if you enter blockchain projects, you are most likely entering through tokens. There, it might not be 5 years, either maybe 3 years, but it's still a long-term story. DeFi is the second strategy, right? Farming, when you simply form a portfolio of altcoins, analyze it, then analyze liquidity pools, regularly rebalance this altcoin portfolio, change the percentages, and regularly move these pairs between different liquidity pools to achieve the maximum maximum profit. Well, and about the high intensity neutral strategy I've already mentioned. This is a more or less understandable classic thing. We also have this for our investors. That's kind of how our fund operates. I don't know.
What strategies?
Yes. I wanted to ask a follow-up. You mentioned DeFi. Can you share what strategies are currently, cool and effective without going into details, just directing, for example, on Uniswap or some other protocols or a specific blockchain? What should we pay attention to? Where can one go now to farm well? Listen, everything changes very quickly in dynamics. It can change in just 2 or 3 weeks. Therefore, if I give advice now and people listen to it in a week, it might already be irrelevant. I can only say that it all depends on the client's profile, the investor's profile. If you are an advanced person and understand everything about DeFi, then of course I would advise experimenting, finding new projects that come up with innovations like how to provide additional rewards to liquidity providers, right? Sometimes they create interesting combinations because when you simply deposit classic, so to speak, blue chip altcoins, right? But at the same time, they give you an airdrop of some of their tokens, right? There are also very interesting marketing stories where you are rewarded. So there are these new, completely fresh, innovative stories where of course, the earnings are higher than the classic ones, but they are, well, highly risky because they always balance on the edge of, let's say, a slightly pyramid-like component, because they depend on a flow of new clients or liquidity providers, right? Will they experience growth in TVL due to some kind of reward? Or will everyone suddenly want to claim their rewards at once and it all collapses, right? I mean, well, it won't collapse, but it could significantly drop. It will only collapse if it's an outright scam, right? But it's very volatile, very risky. If you're just starting out, then of course you should go for the classically proven blue chips, like the top 5 altcoins, the top 10 altcoins, go into a reliable Uniswap, learn and get a feel for it. There too, by the way, you can have a decent income if you engage in it, by tracking this price range, monitoring the rates, and conducting technical analysis of altcoins. So, well, it's also quite a good story. But if you really want to get into it, there are constantly new opportunities. The last ones we experimented with were Berachain, Pendle, and Ethena. Well, but everything new that appears interesting and innovative is intriguing and worth experimenting with. But, well, I wouldn't give any advice right now to go and try it, because even for us, right now we're finding out that everything is great, high returns, but to withdraw, for example, you can enter there with some of our stable coins, right? But to withdraw an asset, for example, if we urgently need to, is much more difficult. It's not a lockup, but rather the model has changed how you enter through which wrapped coins. The withdrawal models is kind of different from the entry model, yes, of your capital. This was actually an unpleasant surprise. And somehow we didn't immediately...
This is probably about Berachain, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's why we look at this normally, because, well, we understand the market we're working in. We are such ready, experienced investors. But even for us, it was a surprise. So I can't really give a direct piece of advice here. Well, I would keep an eye on...
To summarize, look, did I understand correctly? I listened to you. And so, roughly speaking, as I understood it, you confirm or refute that essentially you can track the migration of TVL, yes, where the liquidity is migrating. And if the whales start this migration, like what happened with the same Berachain, when 3.5 or already 4 billion, yes, of liquidity flowed there, and you look at which protocols on DEX, good somewhere, or a protocol like Aave, yes, there, or Compound. So you kind of watch where this migration is going. If you know how to do this, then you can also follow these breadcrumbs and sort of gather this thing. Well, you rightly said that you can stumble upon such a story where you very nicely entered Berachain through a bridge or through Ethereum. They gave you some kind of staking Bera, and it turns out that you also provided into the liquidity pool because they motivated you with an additional APR, right? So you staked all of this on Uniswap. They nicely drew some numbers or points for you, but when it comes to getting out, well, there's no exit yet. And you either have to exit through the same pool on Uniswap, sell that asset there, and essentially they come up with your own strategy to exit.
Exactly, absolutely right. Thank you, first of all, for adding about observing where CVL is heading. I really missed that. You made a good point. And there's one more thing I didn't mention, which I'll say now. It's very important. Well, you summarized it correctly just now. There is indeed one more thing. It's amusing. I don't know, I was even susceptible to it myself, but with experience, I realized that it must be avoided at all costs. It's that when you dive into this DeFi topic, even with Berachain and others, for some reason you get carried away. And all these, the profits, returns, yields, they are mostly denominated in crypto assets, in altcoins. And few people, even in the professional community, calculate a dollar-based P&L to actually measure and forecast returns in US dollars. It's clear that there might be volatility. Like Ethereum might go up or down, but still you can set a range and you can at least think in dollars, right? Or in rubles, right? But everyone thinks in this currency. This is basically normal if you're getting into altcoins for the long term and thinking, yes, I will enter altcoins now for 2 or 3 years. If there is a 3-year winter, it's no big deal. I'll stay in Ethereum and won't sell. But very few people work like that, right? Most people work in such a way to, well, I don't know, at least have the opportunity to withdraw some income once a month at the very least, right? Well, a 2-month, 3-month perspective and horizon. But here it's essential to have these calculations when you invest. Look, okay, and how much did I earn in dollars, assuming these percentages promised to me by, let's say, Uniswap, Parachain, and so on? Assuming that even if Ether drops to 2,500, how much is that in dollars? Very few people ask this question. This is also very important. This is fundamentally important.
I just showed a platform. There's one. I don't know if you use it or not.
Yes, I use it.
Yes, Reverte Finance. And here there's a particularly cool column that you mentioned. It's the total P&L which calculates through dollars, whether you lost or earned. Because when you look here at uncollected fees or at an APR fee of 40%, that's great. But it's even better if it calculates for you here. Yes, also divergence losses, impermanent losses, it calculates all of this here. And shows you that even though I earned fees of $338, my actual P&L at the current rate is only $102. That's it.
Yes, it's a very cool tool. We use it every day. And I recommend it to everyone. And the main thing I'm saying is, to summarize my last comment, for the first few years, I had the feeling that all the developers of DH, DeFi, staking farming, and so on, they seem to be deliberately immersing us, creating this illusion. Now I'll earn 40%. So we kind of live in this illusion. And then when we come out of it, it's like, oh, I expected much more, right? Therefore, to avoid this illusion, it was necessary to track this indicator and keep it in mind regularly.
I'll add about Reverte Finance. Unfortunately, my recent observations, which I am conducting, I just compare. I took Reverte Finance and took a pen and a piece of paper and recorded it in a dollar equivalent. Unfortunately, Reverte Finance doesn't quite objectively calculate this, the total P&L that Slava showed, because I have exactly the same pool. And if you calculate it, well, in dollar equivalent, I currently have a loss. I will show very quickly, although it shows a profit of $110, but that's not the case. I have uncollected fees of $141, no? But when I entered this pool, I have it recorded. I invested $7,400, and I created this pool. Considering that now it is worth $6,800, I lost, as it were, in dollar terms. Again, in dollar terms, $500. At the same time, I earned 141, and it should show here that I have overall a minus $350 total P&L. That's why I didn't fully understand the math, although here...
It's because it considers your USDT, which you put in there, not as a loss, because you entered entirely through USDT, and it calculates as if you had 2 assets, so it cuts half off.
That's why, yes, I'm saying that you just need to understand that if you want to calculate in dollar terms, then Revit Finance is not entirely honest.
That's a very good comment. Yes, that's a very good comment. Our analysts extract all this and then recalculate it, yes, in the fund. But you're absolutely right that you really need to dig deep into this, but keep a clear dollar income. Yes, you're right. No, not the one the system shows you, but to calculate it yourself on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet, and generally keep track of it yourself, yes.
I have a separate spreadsheet. I enter the input data in dollar terms, the amount of assets, and then I check. Well, okay, those are details. People will figure it out. Overall, you are engaged in a very commendable endeavor. It's a really great direction. I wanted to ask him another question about the cryptocurrency market. There are now narratives for the year 2025. What narratives do you highlight among everything that is currently on the market?
Well, there are several. The first, well, not the first, no, in terms of importance, they are all important and all can work very well. The first is, let's say, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, decentralized artificial intelligence. This is a very powerful market segment, promising. It will take a little time. That is, it's not right here and now, but it will develop very actively this year. Why is this a powerful market segment? Because here, both artificial intelligence and blockchain technology, despite being disruptive technologies, which essentially are everywhere, in all rankings, they are in the top 5 technologies that measure. Each of them has its own, what is called pitfalls, that is certain restraining factors or some shortcomings or some downside, right? For example, if with artificial intelligence, it's about authenticity, that is confirming whether this content is created by a human or artificial intelligence ownership rights, who owns it, what rights are there, right? And the monetization of these rights. There is a difficulty with computational power for training models. There is a difficulty with the fact that centralized AIs currently dominate. And this is very dangerous because, like social networks and others, they can disconnect you from it. They can exclude you from it. They provide you with answers to questions that are subject to certain censorship, right? And this censorship can be imposed on you by a central authority that owns this artificial intelligence. Exactly. There is no transparency in how the answers are formed and there is a very serious problem with computational power and electricity consumption, because I have already heard that at the moment, I think it was Google or someone who said that to further develop, we need to build our own nuclear power plant next to the computer center, right? Exactly. And it's all very complicated. And here, blockchain could really help with all these issues by confirming the authenticity of content and very skillfully automating, well, yes, through smart contracts to track ownership rights and establish a certain reward system or payments for these rights, doing it very effectively. Exactly. It could definitely do this if, for example, in a decentralized format, unused computing power from various computers around the world were utilized and connected with it for a reward, and they would process artificial intelligence tasks. Exactly. Again, with the help of, but if we're talking about energy consumption, there are also many interesting projects that deal with how decentralized artificial intelligence can optimize energy consumption, right? Exactly. Through distribution across various computational points, calculation and computing, right? Exactly. So this is a very big topic. For blockchain, artificial intelligence can also be super helpful. Firstly, it can significantly speed up and streamline the development of various applications for investors, for developers, for investors, it can be a very powerful tool for rapid and objective technical audits. That this is a genuine decentralized protocol. This implies that there are no developer backdoors and that can withdraw money or tokens whenever they want, and that there are no vulnerabilities that hackers can exploit. It also allows for a quick audit of tokenomics, ensuring it's not a pyramid scheme, but a legitimate project with a well-balanced economy, right? Exactly. This can also be a great story for investors. Exactly. For projects that actively want to develop all the stories with AI agents, digital employees, community building. It's also a very big, significant story. That is, they complement each other. And if this is developed wisely, it becomes a very powerful market engine, both blockchain and AI. This hybrid, collaborative, well, not exactly hybrid, it's more accurate to say convergence. These two combined stories work very, very well. The second, this is the tokenization of real assets. It has been talked about for a long time, but it is significantly hindered, not developing as actively, not yet taking off, and there is no mass adoption. Although in terms of importance, I think wallets based on abstract accounts and DEX are more significant. But since I started talking about tokenization, let me finish. I think it might take off due to the radical change in strategy by the American regulator towards crypto. So friendly, surely everyone listening knows that with Trump's arrival, there was a sharp turnaround in that. In his words, if We no longer fight the technological revolution in the blockchain and crypto industry. We will lead it. And he promised a lot during the election campaign, including that part of the US National Reserve would be placed not only in gold, but also in Bitcoin. And in fact, that he now has a huge team of very smart people led by David Sachs, working on a very serious long-term program within which, attention, yes, one of the priorities becomes the tokenization of Wall Street. That is essentially all the stocks there, yes, that are on Wall Street are planned to be issued as, a derivative, a digital equivalent in the form of a token. That's it. And in fact, this is just one of the scenarios. Then there are large producers of various goods there. Well, I communicate because I am well immersed in this topic. So I don't know, wine, not olive oil, electricity, gold, metals, oil and gas, yes. Whatever you want, everything can be tokenized and create additional value for retail investors, for some small companies. Essentially, this is not for the 3 or 4 monopolistic companies, right? And this is precisely to democratize access to these resources. And this is a big topic, but it couldn't have been realized earlier if it weren't for this shift. That's it. Then there's also the topic of cross-border payments, because, the 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥, the old system is changing and it has shown its flaws. I mean, based on SWIFT, considering all the sanctions, restrictions that have been in place, the fact that the entire old global financial, economic, and trade system is collapsing at a rapid pace, and the answer to all this could be a new decentralized system, free from any central authority that can impose bans or restrictions, right? So this system is in public use now by all countries, all participants, right? In foreign economic trade and commercial activities. Exactly. And the company or project that first creates and launches this network could also be a very powerful story. But indeed, both tokenization and the story of a decentralized system are more dependent on the decisions of large countries, large counterparts in all of this. But what is independent and cannot be influenced by any regulator, not even the American one? This is what I mentioned about artificial blockchain. And there are a few more stories. One of them is decentralized exchanges. And here they could develop much more rapidly and actively if the process of entering from fiat to crypto on DEX and exiting from crypto to fiat were absolutely seamless and problem-free. That's it. And considering the current development, many companies and projects that are working on solving this problem, it's a very interesting topic. They are addressing it. There is an opinion that it can be solved using the zero knowledge proof protocol, meaning proof with zero disclosure. That's it. Why? Because this protocol allows for verification of the owner of a particular crypto asset based on certain aggregated information and so on. So on one hand, you get confirmation that this is a legitimate player. They're clean, right? And his currency is clean, and he hasn't, tarnished his reputation with his transactions anywhere. But at the same time, maintain confidentiality and anonymity. Yes, when he enters and exits fiat. So for example, if simultaneously such a technology appears and is used, and regulators and banks allow interaction with fiat in such a format, it means we are doing KYC, right? We confirm through this technology that this is a legitimate, honest user of crypto assets. But at the same time, we do not disclose everything like banks currently do, asking for not only a passport, name, surname, residence, where you live, and so on. They now ask for a lot, show the source of income, salary statement, and so on. That's it. And if this happens, it will be an explosion. That's why we are now looking at those who are developing such protocols. What else. These are wallets based on the concept of abstract accounts. Because one of the big problems is that all of this is very complicated. We want it to be intuitively understandable, easy, and simple. But at the same time, if I lose the seed phrase, I don't lose my assets, right? And here, as it were, amidst the security of access to assets, the ability to restore access to assets. This is also an interesting challenge that many are currently addressing. And if we solve it and we are looking at these projects, it will be mass adoption, because many are hesitant to enter now. Well, those who are not immersed in crypto. Yes, I don't understand anything, but I downloaded MetaMask, and it's like, yes, here it seems somewhat similar to online banking, right? Here's some phrase, I put it somewhere, forgot it, lost everything. I can lose everything, to hell with this crypto. I was completely shocked. I occasionally participate in various investment clubs, entrepreneur clubs. The top one where I was invited to speak about blockchain, about crypto. There was such a meeting, very intimate. I think there were about 20 entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley, Russian speaking. So in short, I'm talking about something, and with me there was Dima from ETH Foundation. We were together, I spoke first, then he spoke, and then Dima, not me, asked me, raise your hands if you have a crypto wallet, and it turned out that only 3 hands out of about 20 people were raised. Yes, guys, they are engaged in high-tech technologies in Silicon Valley, right? Well, there's artificial intelligence. Some have other projects like e-commerce. So Dima and I were shocked by the fact that even such advanced people don't have a crypto wallet. They don't fully understand it. They think it's a scam, a fraud, that it's some kind of nonsense, and it's better to stay away from it. And can you imagine what it's like for people who aren't as advanced? Therefore, as soon as wallets appear, and the ability on one hand to control, own, and manage your assets without the restrictions of central banks, but at the same time, if I somehow forget or lose something, I can regain access to my assets through other protocols without a passport. This is a very powerful topic, and it will truly lead to mass adoption. To summarize, the 2 topics that can truly lead to mass adoption are DEX, fiat to crypto, crypto to fiat without disclosing information, and KYC, which banks require, but with a specific protocol for confirming the legitimacy and integrity of the counterparty. And the second story is wallets, kind of based on, decentralized wallets, non-custodial, based on the concept of abstract accounts.
Thank you very much, Vlad. I want to remind our viewers who are watching our podcast. So you will be participating as a headliner at the Crypto South event, which will take place on the 31st of May. We will also be there. So friends, if you want to chat in person, come and join us. We might leave links under this video. You can also register for this event. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. I want to ask you one more main question. Very important. What advice can you give to young entrepreneurs and crypto enthusiasts?
Listen, well, to crypto enthusiasts, I can immediately say these are still 2 different groups. They sometimes overlap. For crypto enthusiasts, it's all about education. That is, you really need to engage in research and self-education. A little practice with large sums, because the market changes very quickly, and there is a lot of new things in it. And essentially here you really need to, on one hand, improve yourself and look everywhere for what is called common sense. That is, one of the problems of crypto enthusiasts is that they get so carried away with that illusory world, which, as we have shown, is painted for us by Rever or others. And they become detached from sort of reality, right? In terms of forgetting to actually check, for example, profitability in dollars, right? Or when they invest in projects, they forget to check the economic model. That's it. In our venture fund, we have a scoring metric system, and I have talked with other funds and others. There, we check the community, check the TVL, check the tokenomics. Tokenomics refers to how the entire volume of tokens is distributed, and what lockups there are, and so on. I always say, where is the business model? Here, the financial forecast, the classic P&L. Where is the cash flow forecast? And if we promise returns, say for staking our token, where does the money come from to pay these returns? And the money comes from transaction fees from some commission. Okay. And how many users do you need to earn this commission and pay it out? And this connection with real business models, people lose. Therefore, if you are a startup founder, as crypto enthusiast or investor, you always need this bridge to real business. The most successful and reliable projects are only when there is a balanced economy. Yes, when there is common sense. Yes. And yet for some reason, people often forget about this and get lost in an illusory computer game with high yields and so on. That's it. Like even now with Rever, which I think is the best analytical system, it still highlights a fake dollar for us, right? Meaning halfway there, right? As if, well, there are 50% of the assets in the pair that they only show. So that's the story here. In principle, for other entrepreneurs, yes, it's probably very individual. My mentoring experience shows that every entrepreneur, has their own requests, their own tasks, and so on. I can only say that my experience shows that a successful business, a market-oriented one, not affiliated with the state or anything like that, but a market-oriented one can be built only if there are several elements combined, right? It's a very strong product idea. You understand what problem you are solving. There is a team of like-minded individuals complementing each other with the necessary expertise. There is a very strong belief in oneself and the project. Without belief, it's very difficult because at the first challenge, you might give up. There's a certain level of flexibility that the initial idea might change significantly, and that the market might tell you something that requires you to change. There is a certain level of recklessness and passions in it that despite something frightening happening, I still believe it will work out. I keep moving forward, yes. There is a certain persistence in achieving the goal. That is, you don't get derailed after the first, second, or third problem. You push towards that goal. There is strong intuition and a certain level of luck. This is essentially a set of qualities without which it's difficult to build a successful business. And by the way, everything changes radically. The way successful businesses were built before is no longer entirely relevant, considering decentralized technologies and the mentality of the new generation. A lot has changed. For example, it is now very important to conduct business with ease and joy, not fighting with someone as a competitor, but collaborating. And this feeling of thrill, ease, and joy is now much more important than before, when we used to build businesses through achievement and struggle. So there's a lot here. But of course, I cover all this in detail in special courses or in my mentoring programs. But in short, that's how it is. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much.
In ease and joy. And for those who want more details, you're very welcome. We'll leave contacts and links below. You can find Vlad or come to the crypto event and you'll meet both us and Vlad there, and we can have a more detailed conversation. Thank you. We'll wrap it up here. Write your questions below. If there are great questions, we'll forward them to Vlad and maybe he'll answer some of them. Or we might organize another podcast, or even a live stream where you can ask questions directly in real time.
Yes, that would be great.
All the best, guys.
Goodbye, everyone.